Hello and welcome to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Carlotta Rebello. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll be bringing you some of the very best interviews and reports from the past week of coverage on Monocle Radio, with highlights from our studios here at Midori House and also from around the world. This week, it's that time of the year again. Eurovision is here.
If you compare this to a World Championships in skiing, for instance, the Eurovision Song Contest is now much bigger.
Plus, a sweet treat from Indonesia.
Pandan and coconut, they are a perfect match because it's balancing for both savory and sweet. They are complement each other.
All that and much, much more over the next hour here on The Curator with me, Carlotta Rebello. So welcome to this week's episode of The Curator. Of course, one of Monocle's major stories this week is the Eurovision Song Contest, which announced its winner last night. In many ways, Switzerland can be considered the true home of the event. It is coordinated by the Geneva-headquartered European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, and Switzerland hosted and won the very first edition in 1956. But at the helm of this rather Swiss enterprise is in fact a rather dapper Swede. You might recognize Eurovision's executive supervisor, Martin Osterdahl. On finals night, he announces when the votes have been counted, but this moment in the spotlight is the culmination of months of behind-the-scenes grunt work getting Eurovision, still the world's most watched non-sporting TV event, shipshape and sparkling. Martin speaks with Monocle Radio's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, about the complexities of hosting an event like this.
What we do, a large part of what we do is the knowledge transfer from each year. So how to set up and organize what is the world's largest music event and arguably most complex TV production. So that's what the executive supervisor does, most days of the year. I have the experience of producing the show. Me and my team work on this every year, so we make sure that the new host broadcaster gets all the information they need in a timely manner to organize this, because we have a very unique hosting model. If you compare us to other big international events, we have the model that if you win it, you host it. It's super unique, and you don't have much time. You need to start straight away. So we take the Monday off after the grand final, and then we start again on Tuesday because you'd have no time to lose. When I compare this to, I used to be a commissioning editor of entertainment and sports programming at SVT before, and I was involved with a lot of host broadcasting projects on the sports side. And if you compare this to a World Championships in skiing, for instance, the Eurovision Song Contest is now much bigger and much more complex. And if you're the host broadcaster for a ski World Championships, you know that 5 years in advance. Normally. And you have a national federation, you have an international federation, and you can plan with the region a number of years before the event is actually takes place. In the Eurovision, that's not the case. You win it on a Monday night, and you get an envelope from the executive supervisor saying, "Congratulations, you've won. You're expected to put all this together a year from now," and it goes out live to hundreds of millions of people. It's quite a daunting task to be the host broadcaster. So what we start with on the Tuesday after the grand final is, of course, to prepare for the host city selection, because that's the first thing that needs to be put in place. So we help the host broadcaster to put together what we call a request for information that goes out to cities, to the cities that are interested. So it's cities and regions normally. And that's a long list of stuff, that needs to be put together. And then we ask them to come in with the replies to that request for information, and then we try and then each host broadcaster does that slightly differently year from year. It's either a very open and transparent sort of bidding process and go on site visits, and sometimes it's more sort of an internal discussion and selection. So it's different in terms of how it's done, but we are always involved from the EBU side, supporting that process, and ultimately also approving the final decision of the city and the venue. And we need the city, we need the venue to start, because everything in the Eurovision Song Contest starts from the stage in terms of production. So the stage is like the script of our movie, if you like. Before you have the script to the movie, you can't do all the other things, right? So for us, it's the arena, it's the stage, and then we can start with everything else that needs to be put in place. So that's the summertime. That's what we do in the summer. and ideally, we know where we are, we know in which arena we're in, and what it looks like by August, September.
And it's funny, we'll go to the next topic soon, but about cities as well. Do you feel that you don't necessarily go to the biggest city or to the capital traditionally? Is this a way as well for soft power for those perhaps smaller cities as well? We've seen that with Liverpool in the UK, which was fantastic as well. We're seeing this with Basel now.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just the venue that we need. We need so much more. We need a lot of hotel rooms. We need, in the Eurovision Song Contest every year, if you look at the accreditation system we have, that we accredit people with badges to access the venue and the other secure locations, we typically print about 10 or 11,000 badges for people. So that's the amount of people that come in and do something in order to put this all in place. So it employs every year about 10,000 people, which is quite massive, and something that people at home in front of the television perhaps do not realize. So yeah, we do need a lot of hotel rooms. And we need an international airport reasonably close by, and a lot of other things. The special thing about Eurovision compared to other big shows is that the challenge for us is also, in terms of crowd management, it's not front of stage or the access of the audience, it's the backstage area. Close to the arena, there needs to be a massive area for the delegations, so where we have the changing rooms for up to 26 delegations who are maybe 20-25 people each. They need to have hair and makeup, they need to have a facility to organize their costumes, there needs to be a massive prop storage area, there needs to be the logistics behind stage are quite extraordinary. When we produced Eurovision Song Contest in Malmö 2013, I remember that the last big show before us was Lady Gaga's World Tour, which at that time was the biggest tour. And I think Lady Gaga came in with something like 30 semi-trailers of stuff, of technology and props, and we had 97. And now I think we're over 200. So 200 trailers of stuff come into a venue, and you need a traffic manager just to manage, or a group, traffic management group that just takes care of the loading in and loading out and storing all these things, because Lady Gaga has one act and lots of variations to that act that we have.
That was Martin Osterdahl, Eurovision's executive supervisor, and you can read the full interview with him on monocle.com. Now, we also featured a very special edition of our Global Countdown this week, as Fernando guided us through his 5 songs that you need to hear this year.
And finally, on today's show, it is the Thursday before the Eurovision Song Contest Grand Finale, and with that, our senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, transforms himself into our Eurovision correspondent. And Fernando, you've brought us a special Global Countdown, haven't you?
Special, and I'm keeping it very simple as well, Chris. So basically, it's going to be 5 songs you need to know for Eurovision. Let's say you haven't been paying attention to the headlines or haven't been listening enough to Monocle Radio, and you just want to say, which 5 songs can I cheer on the big day on Saturday? I'll give you a little guide here.
You're giving us sort of a little taster. I have to say, Faye, I always say this for Eurovision, that I don't like to listen to all the songs fully beforehand because I want to get the full experience on Saturday. But this is like a little primer.
If it wasn't my job, I would agree with you 100%. I like the kind of level of excitement, but I do have to listen to the tracks. It's my job.
You know what's down, what's going on. And so where are we going to start? What is the 5th track that you recommend?
Well, we're going to Spain, and Spain's an interesting one. Last time they won was 1969, and I genuinely think that the Spaniards, they have been working very hard with very good entries.
They try, but they don't point very well. They always try very hard.
They always try very hard. I remember Chanel with her amazing kind of dance moves. Talking about dance moves, I think they're back this year. And this time it's Melody. And the song is brilliant. I mean, the song's called Essa Diva, This Diva. I mean, can you be more Eurovision than that? Let's have a listen. It makes us all smile, let's be honest.
It does. That is very, very Eurovision. Absolutely.
And can you believe that her career, she's like 20 years of career. I think she started when she was only 10.
Whew,
as an actress, as a dancer, as a singer there, of course. So I do like melody.
And this is her Eurovision debut.
Absolutely. A little bit cheesy here and there. I like it.
Well, I mean, what is Eurovision if it's not cheesy?
Exactly.
That's what Eurovision is about. You have to have a little bit of cheese. Speaking of which, though, our next entrant is less cheesy, a little more fun, controversial.
Love it.
One of your favorites, though.
It's very, if I may say, empowered, you know. It's definitely my personal favorite. It is from Finland, Erika Wikman with Ich komme. It's funny because there are a lot of restrictions on Eurovision. What words can you say, what words you can't. She managed to escape this kind of restrictions somehow. Maybe because she's singing...
Well, because it can mean so many things. It can be totally innocent. She's just, I'm coming. That's all it means in German. I mean, what else could it possibly mean, Fernando? She's coming onto the stage.
I think she means very well. Erika Wikman, Ich komme. It's the only song that gives me from this year's, selection that gives me goosebumps.
Goosebumps for that sort of crescendo when she reaches the Ich komme point.
I love the way you say the word crescendo, Chris. And you know what? And I see, do you know the song Underworld, Born Sleepy from 1996, soundtrack of Transporting British electronic music?
Yes, yeah, I can see some similarities there.
I see a little bit of that. So, it's not cheesy, in my opinion. I think it's a really well-constructed piece of a Finnish electropop.
Finnish electropop. Well, where are we moving from? I mean, where can we move from there? We just need to climb down now from our Ich komme moment.
Very different vibes. We're heading to France, which is another country that have been trying very hard to win Eurovision. And you know what?
Also some fantastic tracks over the last few years that just didn't quite get the recognition maybe they deserved.
Pure artistry. And she was my favorite artist that I've interviewed this year. She was so genuine, so nice. And she's a massive name in France. Usually, not necessarily a country pick the most famous artists. But in the case of Luan, I mean, she has millions and millions of followers. She's one of the best-selling artists in the country. And this song is dedicated to her late mother. Because her late mother was a massive Eurovision fan and said, you know what? I want to see you one day on that stage. And this song is basically her saying, I'm here.
I made it.
It's Luan with Mama. Powerful.
I mean, I gotta say, Fernando, it's very powerful, but it feels like it has that style that France always does. Very strong, very powerful ballad, very moving, but doesn't quite reach the top.
I wonder with a name like Luan, perhaps things could change.
Perhaps.
And I discovered one very fun thing about Luan. Her grandmother was Brazilian, so she does have some Brazilian heritage. Very happy to hear that.
You have a horse in the race.
Exactly.
Okay, well now I'm sort of excited. We're heading to my home country, one of my home countries anyway, Austria. What do you make of this?
And so you should, Chris. Of course, Austria is a great country when it comes to Eurovision. And this is generally the second favorite to win. So there are strong chances, and I can see why. It is operatic, but it is pop and it is techno, all at the same time. His name is JJ. He's Austrian indeed. I think his family is very international, so they lived abroad, but then they moved back to Austria in 2016. I think it's a great song, but I would like to hear a personal take after we listen to this. JJ, Wasted Love.
I'm drowning in my feelings. How do you not see that? Now that you're gone, it's worse than love. It's worse than love. Now that you're gone.
Wow. People love these operatic tones on Eurovision, I have to say.
But how often do the operatic tones win? This is again my question here. It is another very powerful song, very strong voice. It's one of those you feel like will do very well with the jury. But I do wonder about the popular vote.
Well, you've missed that there was a techno bit.
Yes, I think we skip the techno bit.
Hear the techno beat, because when techno and opera gets together, I can see a potential Eurovision winner there. And I would love to go to Austria again. Maybe not to Vienna, because Vienna hosted in 2015, but I don't know.
Somewhere else, Salzburg, my father's hometown. Somewhere like
Bad
that would
Ischl,
be
Bad Ischl
fabulous.
maybe?
Bad Ischl, there are many options. Austria has really given it a big go ever since that 2015 Conchita Wurst. Like they've been trying very hard, so we'll see how this does. And I have to say, now we're coming to number one, and if this wins, it would be a bit sad because it's kind of predictable. But who do we have at number one?
It is predictable and, not necessarily my favorite song of the bunch, but I have to say I've been singing along to that track. There's something quite catchy about it, and it is in Swedish, so it's interesting that I've been singing along to this. I will explain a bit, because it's quite a funny story, because they are actually Swedish-speaking, but they are from Finland, so they are part of the Swedish-speaking minority in the country. So in a way, it's also a Finnish act, if you think about it. This could be very political, Chris, but this is Kai with Bara Badu Bastu, which is a song about saunas. I mean, it's impossible not to sing along. I'm sorry.
But this is what Sweden does so well, which is obviously why they win so much. But you kind of want to leave room for somebody else.
They really master the code. And honestly, if they win again, great. Love Sweden. But my God, even in my 10 years of Eurovision, I've been to Malmo 2013, Stockholm 2016, and Malmo again last year. So basically in 10, 11 years, will I go to Sweden 4 times? I want to go to a different country. But nevertheless, well done to the Swedes/Finnish, because I think it's a good entry.
And they would have the record if they win this year, correct?
They will, because at the moment they're tied with Ireland with 7 victories each. If Sweden wins this year, bye-bye Ireland.
British artist Gilbert and George opened their exhibition Death, Hope, Life, Fear this week at the Gilbert and George Centre in London. Spanning the years of 1984 to 1998, the 18 pieces of work centre around the moral dimension of modern society. For the briefing, Monocle Radio's Tom Webb sat down with the artists ahead of the opening. And Tom began by asking what the response has been like to the reopening of the Gilbert and George Centre for the first time in 2 years.
We're very surprised and pleased with the response. We get letters, strangely, from all over the world, from people who've just come to London and seen our centre. The whole idea of the centre was a response to, we were stopped by people in the streets all over the world who said, I love your art. And we used to say, which art? Well, they hadn't seen an exhibition. They'd seen a magazine article, a television programme, but they'd never been in front of a picture. And so the centre is a place which is always somewhere in London where you can see a real picture.
Yes, every artist wants to be seen. That's quite important. That's why we were not seen enough. So we realized we have to do it ourselves. All the museums, they show you once in a life, once every 2-3 years. But then because after all, we produce, 1,000, 2,000 artworks, and you cannot see them anywhere. So why don't create your own studio?
And is that the type of people you've had coming through your doors, international visitors who love your art?
I say in general, our art attracts a much wider range of people than maybe the more restricted fine art.
I think our art is quite visually powerful, and so they are speaking language that we created. We can show it anywhere. We can go to Japan, they all understand it. South America, we did it all over Europe and every city, and now we are trying to persuade the locals to love our art.
And how important to you is it to keep this place free to enter, and how are you able to keep it free to the public?
It's not so expensive after all, not once it is finished, not. And it seems we can sell what you call prints to support
Prints and ink washes.
Ink wash to support it. It's very easy.
We did a series of ink washes recently with different slogans. No image, just slogans. And which one was the bestseller? Fuck 'em all. Why is that? It's got a good piece of market research on the state of the human race.
You're surrounded by work from the 80s and 90s in which you appear naked for the first time. How did that happen? What was the transition there?
After all, it's just a different suit, not it?
I would say so. Looking at
Just
it,
extended our visual vocabulary, you could say, in academic terms.
The artist had to be visible in total how it is. Not, I really believe that.
Our art has always had a degree of vulnerability, and I think that extended it to a greater degree.
and can you explain the colours as well? Because the reds, the yellows, the greens, so vibrant, so vivid. What was the choice there?
When we were baby artists, we started to do what we call photo pieces, and they were all black and white because photo paper is black and white. And then one day we spilt a bottle of red ink in the studio, and we thought we'd just push the red all over, and that was discovering red. And then we went on from that to discover
then
all
we
the colours.
discovered yellow, green, and blue, and after then we discovered everything, and we were able to create we were able to create it for ourselves, to this new way of making art.
We're sitting in the middle of the exhibition, and it's hope, life, death, fear. These four concepts, what's your relationship with them?
It was in some funny way, it was David O'Billiard who was the genius who getting all the models for us. Now, he went day and night to all the clubs to find these models for us, and he died of AIDS. So that's Hope, Life, Fear became very visible for us.
It is, apart from everything else, it's just a little bit of a homage to the late David O'Billiard.
You like people to see their own light in their life when they look at your work. What is the light that you see in your work and in life?
I think it is an expression of life, of living, and how wonderful that it is to be alive and have friends and get drunk sometimes.
We want to add to the elaboration of life. Life is more elaborate now than it was when we were babies in the 40s. The world has never been a bigger success story, and we like in our small way to contribute to that. These pictures are contributing to that.
Final question, I guess your relationship with the press, how is it?
I think we always had quite a good press. Sometimes, what you call, even the ones I remember in the Evening Standard, the one who... But it turned out fine, George.
We know one very, very story. At a time when we were having a very, very bad press, and it was 1 week when we had a terrible thing in a national newspaper, a terrible thing in the Evening Standard, and we were stopped on the street by a young person who'd obviously just read his Evening Standard, and he came up. He didn't introduce him, and he said, "They don't look, do they?" We thought that was very, very simple and very revealing. Yeah. They don't look, do they?
But in general,
he got it right.
In general, we had a great press. I really believe that. We managed to seduce them in some way or another.
We also know how little it means. Some days we think it's very important, some days not. But I remember when we had one of the worst newspaper articles ever, and we left the house in fear, thinking all the people in London have just read this horrible news about us. And we passed our neighbour who waved and said, "Good morning, marvellous coverage, marvellous coverage."
Staying in the culture world now, it can often be hard enough to get people to read books. But how then do you go about getting people to read about books? This is a challenge confronted by Gilbert Cruz, the editor of the New York Times Book Review. For the Monocle Daily this week, Andrew Muller spoke to him and began by asking about preserving the reputation of the New York Times Book Review amid the mayhem of the current media landscape.
It's been difficult in two ways. The first is that we still are, at least in the United States, the outlet that, writes about reviews, more books than any other. We want to sort of maintain that supremacy in the minds of our readers, but we also understand that what it means to write book reviews, to consume book reviews, has changed in the modern media environment that we are. And so the goal, the task, the difficulty is keeping your reputation while also understanding that you actually need to change in many ways, or you're going to lose people to all the other mediums that I think that we all know that we compete with. And so how do you write about books in a way that people want to read? And how do you do this thing, which I think is very important, which is how do you help them figure out what they're going to read next, which is not necessarily the point of a book review. But for anyone who is a passionate reader, that is one of the most important questions in their life. Every week and every month, what am I going to read next? It would be great if the New York Times Book Review was a place that they actually thought of as a place that would answer that question for them.
I do want to come back to that point, though, about how you adapt to the modern media landscape and how difficult those judgments are, because I've worked in and around media long enough to have witnessed multiple instances of a title or a section with a legacy and an identity to try and go chasing some sort of relevance and staking out some new audience only to find that it isn't there, and in the process they have thoroughly hacked off the loyal audience they already had.
That's my great fear. You're absolutely right. And I think it's the fear of anyone who is tasked with trying to keep a media outlet relevant right now. So, I've been in this job for 2.5 years, and the thing I said when I started was, we need to find new readers for the New York Times Book Review, because if we don't, at some point in the not-too-distant future, we will have no more readers because all of our readers will have aged out. At the same point, the people who currently read us are so loyal, and they have such high expectations in terms of the quality that we're going to deliver them, the quality writing, the quality of the books that we are picking. And this is a challenge. It's a challenge for the New York Times Book Review and really for anyone. How do you maintain your current audience and readership while also growing a new audience? So obviously, we are trying to go where people are. I have had to record vertical videos and go on TikTok, which is not something I thought I was going to have to do when I got this job. I host a podcast now, a weekly podcast, the Book Review Podcast. We have other writers and editors who are having to put their faces out there into the world, put their voices into the world, because text is not the only way in which people learn about books. But we also still, every single week, publish several dozen well-written, diligently edited and fact-checked book reviews. Right? The goal is to keep doing that, is to keep publishing more than 1,000 book reviews a year, which is, I think, where we are, while also grappling with the reality that there are so many people out there that are passionate about books who will never read an issue of the New York Times Book Review. So how else can we read them?
It's a related issue, and it is one I've noticed in arts criticism generally. And I speak as somebody who came up as a rock journalist in the pre-internet era, where, especially in the British rock press, there was this kind of, I'm sure somewhat obnoxious, but kind of swagger to it, in that you would just dish out critical kickings left, right and centre, safe in the knowledge that your advertisers had nowhere else to go. And if any readers were going to get upset with you, they would have to go to all the trouble of actually writing a letter, and who could be bothered with that. It's not like that anymore, obviously, especially in that response from readers of the books that have been criticised, and perhaps even from the authors themselves. Do you notice that maybe reviewers are getting a little more timid, a little less a little less relaxed about dishing out the proper old-school critical battering when it's merited?
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked about this several times in the past few months with people on staff and friends of mine. I think it is true. So the New York Times Book Review has several staff critics, employees, but we also primarily use outside writers, novelists, academics, nonfiction writers, to review books, novelists writing about novelists, historians writing about large pieces of nonfiction. And so these are people who are in that ecosystem. And the ecosystem is not great at the moment, right? You don't want to necessarily be, I can't speak for anyone in particular, but the writer who comes out and slams a fellow novelist, because God forbid, when it's your time to write a novel, someone will do that to you, right? That is a sense that I get. That I can't confirm that. I don't have facts or data, but it's a feeling that I have, that people are just not as comfortable these days with writing negative reviews. If you're a staff critic at a place like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, I don't know if the Financial Times has staff critics, you have a little more stability. You know that if you write something that is negative and you anger people, you will have the backing of your institution. But the economics of arts criticism over the past many decades means that there are fewer and fewer of those staff jobs available. And so most of the people that are writing about books and movies and albums and TV shows are freelancers out there, and they need to sort of, maintain their viability at the same time. It is a very scary time to be a critic, to be frank.
We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Also this week, US President Donald Trump was fielding accusations of corruption after being offered a jet by the Qatari royal family worth $400 million. While the US grapples with the ethics, Monocle's Andrew Muller explains what's in it for Qatar.
I could be a stupid person to say, oh, no, we don't want a free plane.
The U.S. and Qatar are working out the final details of a gift, a big gift.
This is just the latest reflection of an egregious, corrupt presidency.
As of this recording, the status of the gift Qatar has been reportedly poised to present to US President Donald Trump. A custom-tricked Boeing 747-8 worth somewhere in the vicinity of $400 million is unclear. Qatar, perhaps taking note of the response to what would be corruption flagrant and remarkable even by President Trump's formidable standards, is hedging somewhat, saying the stories are inaccurate and the matter is under review and no decision has been made. All of which, alert listeners will note, fall some way short of course this isn't happening, are you insane? It would be outrageous. Because, to be clear, and before we move along to what we promise will be a learned and expansive disquisition on the wider subject of Qatari foreign policy, outrageous is exactly what it would be. It is not even just the obvious and basic bung, i.e. here is a monstrously expensive gift and by golly yes we will be expecting you to pick up the phone whenever we call. It is an almost amusingly massive security risk given the number of nooks and or crannies on a Boeing 747 in which bugging devices might be secreted. Recall that in 2002 a Boeing 767 ordered by China's then President Jiang Zemin, fitted by various companies in Texas, was discovered to be rigged with at least 27 spying devices. The soft power optics are just awful. Steward of the world's biggest economy, commander-in-chief of the mightiest military ever wielded, travelling the planet in an airborne gin palace furnished by a Middle Eastern dictatorship with the population of Chicago and the GDP of Kentucky. Even if it is the case that replacing the ageing pair of Boeing 747-200s, which currently mostly serve as Air Force One, is taking a vexingly long time, the USAF does have other planes, and besides which, modifying a new one to meet the rarefied standards of Air Force One, which is not merely a means of transport, but an airborne command centre from which World War III can be directed if necessary, is likely to take longer than Trump, theoretically, has left in office. And not that Trump or anyone around him cares, but the whole proposal is just hilariously illegal under US law, specifically Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the Constitution of the United States, the so-called Emoluments Clause. Quote, no person holding any office of profit or trust under the United States shall, without the consent of Congress, accept of any present emolument, office or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince or foreign state. By way of perspective and an example plucked more or less at random from among thousands, in 2013, Chief Justice Oumar Sako, first President of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Senegal, presented US President Barack Obama with a handcrafted drum decorated in the green, gold and red of Senegal's flag, which Obama dutifully turned over to the National Archives lest there be any suggestion or suspicion of impropriety. It was worth about $900. For all that, the interesting question is not why would Donald Trump even consider accepting such a gift. It's a great big gold bauble, of course he wants it. But why Qatar would offer it.
I think that was a very nice gesture.
We will not at this time be considering the possibility that Qatar is doing this just because they're a generous and hospitable people. When trying to understand why countries do stuff, it's always useful to consider what that given country wants, which is usually to survive and to prosper, because who wouldn't? Where survival is concerned, Qatar has more reason to be preoccupied than most. It is a small country in a volatile region. It is not so long since Qatar fell out so spectacularly with its vast neighbour Saudi Arabia that the Saudis threatened to turn their shared border into a canal and fill it with nuclear waste.
International companies have been invited to compete for the project. If the project is carried out, it would geographically extend Qatar's isolation from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt.
And that was after the Saudis had arrayed many other Arab countries into a diplomatic and economic blockade of Qatar. Long story short, everyone was annoyed with Qatar's support for various opposition and or rebel groups across the Arab world, including, ingloriously, Hamas, whose political leader Ismail Haniyeh was long a resident of Doha, Qatar's hosting of a Turkish military base, and Qatar's insistence on funding media, including Al Jazeera, that committed actual journalism in Arab countries. It is common for small countries to pursue a commensurately modest foreign policy, basically hoping that they're safe as long as nobody notices them. You do not see Slovenia, for example, swaggering about the world stage demanding a starring role. But since the accession to the Qatari throne of Emir Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani in 1995, he's still with us, but handed over to one of his sons, Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, in 2013, Qatar has instead followed what might be thought of as a roaring mouse strategy. This is a learned allusion to Leonard Wibberley's 1955 novel The Mouse That Roared, later a droll film starring Peter Sellers about a tiny European duchy which accidentally becomes a superpower.
There isn't a more profitable undertaking for any country than to declare war on the United States and to be defeated.
This is why Qatar has done things like founding Al Jazeera, launching a globe-straddling airline, hosting foreign universities and foreign militaries, US Central Command is located in Qatar, and staging a World Cup. And you'll never guess which prominent American family is currently involved in a $5.5 billion venture to build a golf course near Doha. Arguably more usefully, Qatar has also positioned itself as a diplomatic mediator and deal-maker. Qatar has hosted and or enabled talks between the US and the Taliban and between parties to various conflicts in the Middle East and Africa. Possessing Earth's largest gas field obviously helps in funding such endeavours, but those colossal resources are also a reason that Qatar is forever vulnerable, either to the predations of neighbours or to a Middle Eastern conflict which chokes the Persian Gulf and Qatar's shipping routes with it.
All of those countries, we keep them safe. If it wasn't for us, they probably wouldn't exist right now.
A powerful friend, Earth's most powerful friend, would be handy, especially if their fancy new plane's onboard microphones can pick up anything useful.
You know their slogan, yes, yes, speak louder into the tray table.
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Now, on this week's edition of The Urbanist, I was dispatched to Bratislava for the second edition of the Start With Children Summit in the city. The event looks at our urban environments through a child's eyes and assesses how improving the streetscape for our youngest city dwellers affect us all. I spoke to Helen Nobelong, a Danish landscape designer and a pioneer of the natural playground movement. With work across the world, from Copenhagen to the US, she is an advocate for playgrounds that invite play, creativity, and most importantly, invite children to participate in the design process. Let's have a listen.
During many years, designers have been very focused on making play spaces that are very funny for children to play on, and they use a lot of structures from catalogs because they are focusing on safety. And in the catalogs you can look up and it says this structure is safe, so you don't have to worry about it. But also it's a grown-up mistake that everything that has to do with children should be colorful and funny and as safe as possible. It's a mistake, because the more standardized a playground is, the more dangerous it is, in my opinion, because children, they don't learn anything in a standardized playground because they don't have to concentrate on how they move around, because everything is, equal. So it's not a very good challenge for children.
You had an amazing quote during your presentation, which was about children playing on top of a tree, and that they were saying, oh, it's great, the best thing is to have nothing. So it's almost about, allowing for creativity and for children to make up their own mind on how they can use a space.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have experienced during the years. The children, they want to put their own marks on the play. They don't like structures that don't leave any imagination from them. I once heard a child saying, I don't like to play with toys that play with itself, and it's the same in a playground. You have to leave it open-ended so that children, they can find out what it is. It could change from one day to another if it is not defined beforehand.
Tell me about the importance of getting these voices heard, because a lot of times, you have adults designing for kids, but we need to ask them what they want.
Yeah, I think it's very important to involve children, because when you involve them and the playground is designed and their ideas are integrated in the playground, they feel that they have designed the playground, and it really makes them very proud. And it's a good lesson also about democracy, that if you want to have influence in the city, in the playscapes, in parks and so on, you are invited and we will listen to your voice. And I think that's a good way to introduce democracy for children.
Now, we've been having several conversations here this week, and one of them was about the idea of kids' offline and online worlds. And of course, there's a lot of worry about screen time, etc. But one of the things that came up was that often, if given the choice, kids prefer to go outside. It's just that the environment is not ready for that. Hearing you talk about how amazing playgrounds can be and to make kids feel included, is that part of the solution? Is that how we get children that actually play outside in an era of digital and technology taking over?
Exactly. We can't just say, get away from the screens. We have to offer them alternatives. One alternative is that you leave your own phone, leave your own screens, take your child in the hand as long as they want to hold your hand. Get out and experience nature or get out in the city. Walk the city in a slow pace without any mobile phones or screens. Talk about everything you experiences, the birds, the old structures, sculptures and things like that, and walk in a slow pace. Don't hurry from A to B, Make it an adventure just walking in the city.
We enjoy some food and drink next on the menu. In Indonesia, sweets are more of an everyday snacking staple than a grand reveal at the end of dinner. But as these recipes travel far and wide, there's a newfound place for these pandan coconut-flavored delights on formal menus. Here, Jakarta-born chef Rahel Stefani remembers the treats of her upbringing and explores how London's restaurants are interpreting this sugary tradition.
The scent of pandan clings to my fingers. I press a sticky green clip-on between them, feeling the soft chew give way to a burst of warm palm sugar. It's sweet, rich, playful, just the right amount of bite. It's a taste I know deeply, yet here in London it exists differently. Indonesian sweets, or kue, don't have a fixed place in our cuisine. There's no grand dessert course at the end of a meal. Instead, they weave through the day. Bubur ketan hitam, or glutinous black rice porridge, in the morning. Martabak manis, or thick, filled sweet pancakes on a street corner at night. They don't wait for a perfect occasion. They exist as they are. But outside Indonesia, these same sweets are often reframed. Their colors make them ripe for aestheticization. Bright green, dusted in coconut. They're turned into exotic curiosities. Vibrant, adventurous, unexpected. And yet, these are the same flavors I grew up eating in the back seat of my mother's car. Unwrapping banana leaves, biting into something woven into daily life, effortlessly familiar. This abstraction of jajan pasar, or street snacks, into mere flavors for Western pastries, pandan blondies, a signature of my own, pandan donuts, pandan cheesecakes, has changed how these flavors are experienced. The humility of these sweets, their presence in pasar or market stalls and family kitchens, is stripped away in favor of sleek, marketable versions that fit a new aesthetic. As a chef, I've done this on my own accord too. It can be exciting, and I love experimenting with flavor. But sometimes, especially when the priority is to highlight vibrant colors or chase novelty for visual pleasure, it edges towards exoticization. There's nothing inherently wrong. It's exciting to see these flavors explored in new ways, something I enjoy doing myself. But as much as there's space for reinvention and visual satisfaction, there should also be space for appreciation of the original forms. The humble snacks sold in pasars or markets, the cultural contexts they come from. Not everything needs to be rebranded and recontextualized to be worthy of attention. Toba is one of the few places in London where I can find proper Indonesian flavors. Their approach to Indonesian food is refreshingly straightforward. They mostly stick to traditional favorites, contextualized to a higher-end dining experience, though sometimes adapt to local ingredients, but the essence and context of each dish is preserved and communicated. Their approach to Indonesian food feels deeply rooted in nostalgia and traditional flavors, and their sweet offerings bring me back to the flavors I crave. I sit down with Pino, the chef-owner of Toba, over a plate of dessert to talk about Indonesian sweet treats, including his favorite and what makes pandan so iconic.
The first Indonesian sweet or dessert that I remember, my mother gave me the traditional Batakni sweet called kue lapet. It's made from rice flour, desiccated coconut, palm sugar, pandan leaves. Pandan and coconut, they are a perfect match because pandan, it has the aroma, grassy, floral. The coconut has the richness. It's balancing for both savory and sweet. They are complement each other. Pandan is so trendy because I think it's unique flavor as well. And because pandan has a vibrant green color and then the versatility, it has been a staple in Southeast Asia cuisine for the centuries. Some people feel they need to modernize the traditional sweet. But on the other side, a lot of chefs, influencer and brands as well trying to incorporating like to make it like such a pandan latte, the pandan old fashioned as a cocktails at Toba because it's a authentic Indonesian restaurants, but I like to keep it like more like traditional than modernized.
Since Indonesian sweets are rare here, I often find myself drawn to flavors that feel adjacent. Malaysian cuisine shares many overlaps with Indonesian food, whether through shared histories, migration, or regional proximity. What ties so many of these sweets together is the unmistakable pairing of pandan and coconut, the holy grail of dessert flavors, in my opinion. Earthy, floral, creamy, rich. It's a combination that instantly transports me home. At The Leaf in Shoreditch, I try their aptly named coconut pandan combo. It's cendol, an Indonesian dessert made of pandan jelly, coconut milk, and palm sugar, served over ice. Versions of it exist across Southeast Asia, from Malaysia to Vietnam to Thailand, but its roots run deep in Indonesia. The first spoon is icy cold, the kind that makes you pause mid-conversation. The pandan jelly soft and slippery, bouncy, sweetened by the caramel palm sugar, almost smoky. The coconut milk, creamy, but not too rich, just enough to tie everything together. It's funny how even a dessert served in a plastic cup in a cafe thousands of miles away can bring you right back to a hot afternoon in Jakarta. There's been plenty of debate over cendol's origins, especially after a 2018 CNN article named it a Singaporean dessert, sparking an outcry in Malaysia. But Indonesian culinary legend William Wongso debunked the discussion, tracing cendol, or dawet as it's also known, back to Java. It's mentioned in the Surat Centini, a Javanese manuscript dating as far back as the 1600s, and food historians have found references to it even earlier in the 12th century.
Cendol is known internationally. The other word, you know?
What is the other word?
Dawet.
Dawet.
Yeah, I came from East Java. We name it dawet. It was written in the Centini letters like 300, 400 years ago. They mentioned about this dawet issue.
Basically, cendol and dawet, are they the same thing?
Principle is the same thing, except now everyone has their own secret composition. I don't know who is making original dawet anymore because everybody interprets differently.
In London, it can be perceived as an exotic treat. Something fun, something adventurous. But to me, it's just something I used to sip on a hot afternoon without thinking twice. Some call it overlap, others call it influence, but maybe it's just proof that good flavors always find a way to stay. But pandan in particular has taken on a different life. Labeled the new matcha by Nigella Lawson, despite having little in common with it beyond being leaves and, yes, the color, pandan has become part of a pastel-hued nostalgia wave in the pursuit of trending aesthetic. Matcha is Japanese, steeped in ceremony, bitter and grassy. Pandan is fragrant, floral, effortlessly woven into daily life. Yet the two are often conflated, reduced to a shared shade of green. It speaks to something larger, how Asian ingredients are frequently lumped together, blurring distinctions between Southeast and East Asia, reinforcing the same broad strokes of Orientalist food trends. After all this searching, I decide to make something myself. If I can't find the exact taste of home, I'll bring it to life in my own kitchen. I mix glutinous rice flour with water and pandan, kneading until it forms a smooth dough. Rolling each piece between my palms, I tuck in a nugget of palm sugar. A quick dip in boiling water, a roll in shaved coconut, and there it is, warm, fragrant clip-on. As I take a bite, the chewy pandan shell gives way to a molten palm sugar, perfectly balanced by the fresh coconut coating. The flavors, pandan, coconut, palm sugar, are simple, yet they capture everything I've been craving. Not everything needs to be rebranded or recontextualized to be worthy of attention. Some things just are, and sometimes that's enough. For Monocle in London, I'm Rahel Stephanie.
Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by David Stevens and presented by me, Carlotta Rebello. Join us again next week to hear some of the very best of the programs across Monocle Radio. Thanks for listening.